So let's make sure everything's lined up well, and then I wanna go over this, kind of give you my thoughts on it, break it down a little bit. You're gonna have to stick with me. I'd say about 12 to 15 minutes, but I'll probably break this up into shorter videos as well, because it's gonna be a little bit to take in all at once. So let's get started on it. Hey folks, my name is Chris Hall. I'm a real estate agent out of North Texas, and today I'm gonna dive into just kind of what I'm thinking, what I'm seeing in the market. Think of it as a Q&A without the Q, it's just the A. But we've seen something this year that would usually take about 2 to 3 decades. And I heard somebody explain this to me, and at first it didn't make sense, but then when I looked at it, I was like, oh wow, that's actually pretty true. So basically, you know, every 10 years or so, we see a market crash. Well, we've got to see the resilience of the market as we've moved through 2025, because something would happen, stock market's here, everything's gonna end, a couple weeks later we're fine, and we've seen that a few times. And as we're sitting right now, things are actually looking pretty good. And as long as you didn't sell on those crashes in the beginning of the year, your stock and your bonds, or not your bonds, but your portfolio and everything should be looking pretty good for most people. But the GDP numbers, they've been all over the place. And because companies really ordered record amounts of goods in anticipation of these tariffs, we're seeing prices on things like eggs actually start to come down. Now remember, they did these orders pre-tariffs, right? So that kind of messed up the GDP. And while I'd like to think the tariff strategy might be working, I think it's still gonna get a little bit worse before it gets better. And of course, worse is it's gonna be relative to the person it affects, right? It's gonna affect some people more than others. And so what does this mean for people looking to buy or sell a home, really in North Texas, home or land? Well, it's gonna really be dependent on your location and whether it's land or residential. You know, a lot of things are gonna go into what's going to affect your value. And what I anticipate is that as the economy starts to stabilize, and if the tariffs continue to play out like they hope, we'll still be dealing with a lot of uncertainty, but things should work out long term. And when I say uncertainty, the reason is I can go in right now and I can find information saying like the tariffs are working, this is why they're good, and this is the long-term effect, it's all gravy. And then I can go and find more information that says, yeah, that's not the case, and the world's gonna end if we keep on this path. So that's what I mean by saying it's just really uncertain, because there's no clear path to like what's gonna happen. And that's nothing new. Once again, I can remember when I first got into real estate and the market was just starting to get over 2008, and right about 2010, I started seeing the market pick up. But you were still seeing things in the news, which news was a little bit different this long ago, but you could still see the news was saying all these negative things. And I can remember talking to agents, if the news would just shut up, the market would go back to being great, because it already is great. But anyways, as we get closer to the June 17th Fed's meeting, and if inflation starts to move off of its current flat line at 2.4%, because right now we're stuck at 2.4%, and if it starts to trend down towards that 2% goal, and if GDP settles from all those large pre-tariff orders, there's a real possibility that I think that the Fed may lower interest rates, or at least in June, give strong indications that they will reduce it on the July 29th meeting. And if you go back to what Powell said in September of 2023,
progress is probably going to come in lumps and be bumpy, but we're making progress. You know, I think the core PCE came down by almost 60 basis points in the third quarter. So if you, the best thing I could point you to would be the September SEP, where you know, the expectation was that inflation by the end of next year on a 12-month trailing basis would be well into the twos, and the year after that further into the twos. So that's if you look historically, that's sort of consistent with the way inflation comes down. It does take some time, and as you get as you get further and further from those highs, it may actually take longer time. But the good news is we're making progress, and monetary policy is restrictive, and we feel like we're on a path to make more progress, and it's essential that we do.
He laid out a plan, and surprisingly enough, they're sticking to it damn near hell or high water. And whether it's the right plan or not, the strategy was to first talk about lowering interest rates. So let's play this theory out for the June and July meeting. So what he did in 2014 and what I think is going to happen in June is they're going to talk about, let me back up. as long as we're moving in a good trajectory, as long as we're off of that 2.4% inflation and we're moving towards their 2026 goal of 2%. But what they did in 2024 and what he said they were going to do and what he kind of made it sound like that's what he's going to do again in June. But he wants to see the numbers. He wants to see what the tariffs did and how that's going to affect the economy. But if everything's moving well and the jobs reports are good and everything's great, then I don't anticipate they'll actually lower the rates in June. What he's going to do is he's going to say, hey, things are looking promising. Everything's looking really good. We're kind of happy with it. We're on our goal of 2% in 2026. If we keep on this path, since we're going to do 2 rate cuts this year, I anticipate that they'll talk about doing it in June, and he'll say, if we're on the same path come July 29th, then we'll talk seriously about doing a cut in the rate. Or even just give the market confidence that the rate cut is coming. Mortgage rates could start to come down before the Fed actually makes a move. And that's because the mortgage rates are directly tied to the Fed rate, and the Fed rate influences bond yield, and the bond yield affects mortgage rates. So you may start to see those 30-year mortgages come down in June with anticipation for the reduction or the rate cut July 29th. It might not happen, just a theory at this point. But I expect, if that happens and things work out well, I expect inventory will continue to grow through May and in June. At the same time, more buyers will start to step back into the market as school ends and summer begins, which is a typical trend that I've seen years before. But what's not typical is the level of inventory that I'm seeing build up. But I also question myself. I'm like, am I sure about that? Are you sure about that? I'm not quite sure about that. The reason is, I can remember seeing similar buildup pre-COVID. Every election year, there's a sense of uncertainty and people brace for the worst. With the particular president, it's felt even a little bit more dramatic this year. And its reason is there's just so much happening all at once that the consumer confidence is really low and buyers are just really uncertain. And you've got sellers that, man, they just want to squeeze every bit of equity out of their property. But I think a lot of them are really overshooting what they think their home is worth. And that's why you're seeing so many price reductions right now. But on the other side of the equation, you've got the buyers that want to try to get the property for the lowest number as well, which once again, take out the COVID years, that's usually how it works. But as the market sits right now, most home values are about the same or slightly higher than they were last year in North Texas. But some areas have actually seen some drop, especially in neighborhoods where the sellers are competing with new construction. But once again, that's nothing new. That's nothing new at all. I've always told buyers pre-COVID years, if you buy a new construction figure, you're gonna have about 2 to 3 years of depreciation just because you're going from a new home to a pre-owned home before you start to appreciate. So most people, best case scenario, you're looking at 3 years before you could sell your home for what you bought it for, or at least kind of break even. Or 5 years. But that's what I've always told people pre-2019. Like if you buy a new construction, understand it might take about 5 years before you can actually turn a profit on this property. And some homes, in this area, as we move through 2025 and 26, I think looking ahead, values will remain mostly flat through 2025. Some homes will go up in value, particularly those in desirable school districts. Others will drop, especially those that are competing with new constructions or in subdivisions where the builders are trying to finish out and get out of the subdivision. You'll also have some areas affected by affordable housing, and I don't know how to say this in a way that won't upset some people, because I know it might, but it's not my goal. I'm just trying to give information here. But I've noticed where they've put what they call affordable housing immediately around it, it does bring down the values. I've also seen very hyper locally in some smaller neighborhoods where cities have partnered with nonprofit entities to purchase residential homes and use them to help homeless people get back on their feet. Admirable as it might be, it does affect property values. Not always, but if you're in an area where they fixed up a hotel and they're helping people in that position in life, and they've also got some homes in that neighborhood where they're helping people get back on their feet. And when you drive through the neighborhood, you see people that are just kind of hanging out, if you will. If you can understand the picture I'm trying to paint here, that's going to affect property values. But if you're a seller, you really need to be laser focused on your local market and what schools are doing, what inventories. Oh, that's another thing that's going to affect property values drastically moving. I would say at least to 2025, 2026, but also in about 3 years, because that's when some elections will take place. So there's a lot going on in public schools right now. So I'm telling you, if there's a potential that you're going to get rezoned or your district's going to get changed, that can have a massive impact on your value. I'm talking like 10 to 25% of your value could be lost depending on what the schools do. But if you're a seller, you really need to be laser focused on your hyper local market, just your little area right there. And what schools are doing, how many homes are on the market right now that look like yours, that flow like yours, that can potentially compete against yours, what companies in the area are getting contracts or losing contracts. Big ones are like Lockheed. If Lockheed gets a big contract, you're gonna see an influx of buyers in those particular neighborhoods. And you really need to understand the differences between the subdivisions within a city, because you can be in one subdivision and drive 5 to 10 minutes down the road. And let's say in subdivision A, you can make a lowball offer on a home, depending on what it's priced at. But you go 5 or 10 minutes down the road and a home that's relatively similar might be priced about the same. Well, you might have to go over list price on that home. Like I said, it really just depends on a lot of different factors. And that said, the market is shaping up to be more favorable for buyers than it's been for, I'd say, about the past 4 to 5 years. And really, I would say since about 2019. There's more inventory, there's more competition with builders, and that's giving buyers leverage, but only in certain areas and with certain homes. That's something you'll be very specific about the property you're looking for. As we move into 2026, and I would say for probably the next, 4 to 5 years, maybe a little bit longer, you'll notice more demand for updated single-story homes that are gonna sit in that 3 to 5 bedroom range. They're gonna have a dedicated office. They're gonna have a slightly oversized 2-car garage, or even better, a 3-car garage. And I'd also lump into that category homes that some people refer to as a 1.5 story. So essentially you got all your homes all downstairs, but upstairs you might have like a media room or a game room. But we'll see a good number of people downsizing as we move through the years. And I'm noticing those people really focused on those properties. Now they're gonna be selling those bigger homes, like that third or second move up home. So it'll be kind of interesting to see how this plays out, because some people have all their equity built up into their property. Some people have a lot of equity built up into their property, but they also have a lot of retirement as well. And the people that have the funds, I've noticed as they move into their later years, they kind of look at this as their last house, so they almost don't mind paying overpriced, because time's more precious than them versus the money. So they kind of look at it like, you know what, screw it. I want to secure that home. I want to get moved in. I want to enjoy the remainder of my life. I'm going to buy that house. So it's going to be an interesting position that some buyers find themselves in. But, there's a lot of variables. There's a lot of good. There's a lot of positive. But most of all, there's just a lot of uncertainty. And as for how to take advantage of all this for you, well, maybe we'll cover that in a different video. But hopefully this one wasn't too long. I hope I didn't ramble too much, and I really hope that you got some value out of the insight and knowledge that I've gained over 2 decades of selling homes in North Texas.